Hey everyone, I am back with another tutorial, and this time we're going to be creating this explosion effect that you see in the background. Now, compared to the other stuff I've done, this one's actually a little bit more complicated. You can see it's got a lot of layers and particle systems and sub-emitters to it, and lights as well. And for this effect, although I'm going to be using textures from my Ultimate VFX package, which you can find on the Unity Asset Store, you can simply follow along if you have similar textures, or if you just want to get an idea of the techniques involved in creating a more complex effect like this, which takes into account, as you can see, chaining effects, delays, and sub-emitters, layers, noise, and all that good stuff. So really, without any further delay, let's just get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, first move all this stuff out of the way so it's not distracting. Second, I am going to create a new particle system, reset its transform, maybe move it up a little bit so it's centered like that. And then I'm going to, and by the way, this first particle system that I'm creating here will be the embers that you see at the beginning, where you see all those little particles kind of imploding with the bubble, and then after that it explodes. But this is just going to be the noisy little particles that you see at the beginning. So let's turn the start size down, change the material texture to additive, basically point sprite looking thing. And let's change the color a little bit on this to be a bit more yellowish, lighter, something like that. That's good. And we can vary the start size a little bit. I'm not going to do too much variation just for the purpose of this tutorial, but I will be doing some of it just so you can understand how to add more randomization to your effects to make them pop a little bit more. Now right now the shape is cone, so it's basically just going in along the z-axis, but I'm going to change this to sphere. Change the start speed to maybe 0, or actually -1, and have it start from the shell of the sphere, right? So you can see how it's they're being sucked in now. So like that. Start lifetime, maybe 2-ish or something. That's better. So make this 2, 1.5. That's pretty good. And we want them to fade in and out, so let's just set the color over lifetime. So the first, if you don't have presets like this, you can just set the first one to 0, the second point to 0, and then just throw one somewhere in the center, about 50%, and turn that up. So it fades in, fades out. So you can see what that looks like now. Start size, and we can vary this a little bit more. I think that's a bit better. Yep. And that's fine, but I also want to add some noise to this. I'm just going to turn the noise module on, maybe turn the frequency up, strength, that's fine. And also, I don't want this looping, right? So I just wanted to maybe do that for about a second before it explodes, or maybe a second and a half. Now this is fine. I do want more particles being emitted though, so let's turn this up. Let's see what that does. 25. Right, not bad. Turn this up to 1 and turn the strength down to 0.25. Nice. That's not so bad. Okay. So that's just the beginning of it. So after it does that, there should be maybe some sort of outer bubble that's also enclosing in it on itself, like an explosion. So for that, I'm just going to create a new particle system inside this one. And what that really does is, just if you open the editor here, you'll see it controls both of those particle systems at the same time, so I can manipulate it like so, right? Without ever having, just with the one particle system, I control all the others that are childed to it. So this one, I only want a single particle being emitted at the start. And again, just change this shape to, actually this one doesn't have to have any shape because it's not going anywhere. Start speed 0, lifetime maybe 2, 1, we'll see. And this should be also fading in and out. So color over lifetime. Just change this again back to 0, 0, 1 in the center, and maximum. And if you haven't, just hit new here, and that'll create a new preset for us. So next time we want to use this same preset, we can just select it from here to do something. Okay, so let's see. Now I want this to be a halo of sorts. Let's see if I have any halos. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to use this one. Additive with soft particle value set to 1. Try to make it bigger. Okay. Now we want it starting off pretty big and then coming down in size, so let's change the size over lifetime. Well, we'll just use one of these presets right here. So let's see what that looks like. Not bad, okay. I also want to change the color and opacity so it's not so bright. And maybe I don't want it to fade out all the way down in terms of the size, I mean. Okay, and then let's make it a little bit reddish. Okay, that's better. We can make it last a little bit longer too. 2 seconds. Okay, good. And next I'm going to have some smoky wisps also doing something similar. Actually, let's make another particle system inside this, and this one will be a lens flare of sorts. Actually, let's get rid of this. Duplicate this one because it's going to have similar settings from the get-go. I'm going to choose my lens flare spreadsheet right here, additive blending. Turn on texture sheet animation. This is an 8x8 frame spreadsheet, I know, so I'm just going to turn that on. As for start size over lifetime, maybe I can make this go all the way down. What does that look like? Let's turn this down to 1 as well. Turn looping off. That shouldn't have been on. Let's see. Okay, this needs to be much bigger though. Good. Now, actually I don't think I even need to do this because the spreadsheet already shrinks at the end, so that's fine. I'm going to emit a few of these, maybe 5 of them, and give them a random rotation. So 360, simulate. Okay, and then I also want them to have maybe that's too many. 4 will do. We'll leave it 5 for now. Let's turn the opacity down then to 64. Turn on rotation over lifetime, randomize that. So negative 90, 90. What does that make? Good, and I think I do actually want it to scale down a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty good. These particles, I think I can just change the lifetime a little bit so they fade out quicker, and I also want to vary the lifetime. So let's see. Randomization there, maybe 0.5 to 1. What does that make? Oh, that was the wrong particle system. This one should stay at 2. This one should be less. Good. And I will vary it a little bit. Okay, that looks good to me. Okay, next we're going to add those wispy particles. So again, I'm just going to duplicate this one, the lens flare, because the next texture will have the same settings, the particle system. So let's use, for this one, a puff, some sort of puffy alpha blended texture, like this one. This texture sheet is 4x4, it's also not animating, so I just want to choose a random frame from the spreadsheet between the 16 frames that it has. So from 0 to 15, just choose a random frame. You get this. Turn this down a little bit more, just because, and make this a little bit brighter. And I do want variation in the start size, so let's see. And actually I do want variation in the start size for the lens flares too, so I'm going to change these to random between 2 constants. Good. And for the shape, I want it to be a sphere, but I want it to be kind of spread out, so I'm going to maybe make it 0.25. Okay. Random lifetime. Good, so you can see how that looks like it's kind of being sucked in or sucking in the dust around it. Looks pretty good. I'm going to duplicate this again and just choose another spreadsheet, which is my smoke spreadsheet, which is animated. It's not just random frames. And choose alpha blended, so I'm just going to go for the alpha blended. with the correct soft particle value I'm looking for. This one will do. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. And this needs to be a curve. Just the one curve animating forward, so this one. So you can see what that looks like, and it needs to be 8 by 8 because it is in a 64 frame spreadsheet with 8 columns and 8 rows. I can also make this a little bit smaller than the rest, make the shape bigger, and also we have just a few less, just a couple less. There we go. That just adds a slight bit of variation, what I was looking for. Okay. Next we're going to move on to the actual explosion after this effect completes, but before we do that, I actually want to address something. You can see that the lens flare here, the crisscrossing lens flare, is a little bit cloudy just because these particle systems that I added, they're being rendered in front. So what I can do is I can actually change the sorting fudge so they are rendered in a different, but rendered later on. So if I change this to maybe 8, and this one as well, to 8, let's see what we get. That looks a little bit better. Then I'm going to go back here and just change these to maybe 45. So it's not as jarring in the center. Okay? So now for the actual explosion. So this is where we do some delay. So this is going to be the explosion, or actually it will be just a single texture, more or less. So let's duplicate this one, which I know is the lens flare, and change this to the explosion sprite sheet animation that I have, and we'll use the alpha blended version. So you can see what happens there. Now this one I want it to be much brighter, maybe a little bit oranger like that, more orange, and I just want one of these coming out with a random rotation. Start size, or the size over lifetime, I don't want that being messed around with too much. I know the start size should actually be about the same every time, so let's see what that looks like. And I don't want so much rotation. Okay, so I'm going to change this to, well actually I'm just going to disable this, because I don't want any rotation on this explosion. Now right now the explosion just starts at the beginning, which is not what I want. I want it to come out after the particles from before are done kind of imploding on themselves. So for that reason I just turn up the start delay. Let's see what that makes. Good. I think that looks nice. Maybe a little bit smaller. It's too big, perhaps. Okay. And I don't need to modify the color over lifetime, really, because the spreadsheet already has that animated. That's much better. And just to simulate again. Pause. So I'm just going to change this to 0 because there seems to be a glitch with Unity where I can't actually modify the playback speed otherwise, but let's see. Okay, make it a little bit redder. That's about the color I'm looking for. So I'll put this back to 2 and see how that works. This could be a little bit earlier perhaps. It's fine at 2. Next I'm going to make the particles that kind of explode outwards that you see with the trails falling out. So for this one, I think the closest thing would be, well, for this one, let's just create a new particle system and work from scratch. Okay, so again, same thing. Turn the lifetime down, turn the speed to maybe 2 for now. Shape to sphere. Okay, turn this down to about half a unit, half a meter, I guess. That's what Unity treats them as. And not rate over lifetime, but I want a specific amount being emitted without any looping. So let's say I want about 10 of these coming out. What does that look like? Right. And okay. So for this one, actually, it's a little bit interesting because it's not these particles that I want. I want them to emit a trail as they go. So let's first of all turn the lifetime down, simulate these, or not the lifetime, sorry, the start size is what I turned down just now. Have them fade in and out just so I can quickly get an idea. And this one, instead of having it at the center, it's going to be a little bit, maybe 15% at the start. So it's brighter and then it slowly fades out. Okay, that's fine. And I also want it to, well, first let's color it a little bit as well, just so we can see what that would look like. Okay, so a little bit more orange, brighter, like so. So right now I'm only using this as a template. I'm not going to actually be using these particles, which is why I'm not bothering changing them right now, the textures. Now they need to have some sort of trail, so for that we can finally go to sub-emitter, inherit everything, and on birth, correct, and just go ahead and hit this plus icon here. That'll automatically add the sub-emitter. So for the sub-emitter, you can see what that looks like in the texture. I'm going to again use that smoke texture, similar to the animation before, and we can make this additive. So additive with a 0.5 soft particle value. Texture sheet animation needs to be enabled 8x8. Let's see what that looks like. Random rotation for the sub-emitter, 360 by 360. Oops, 360. And turn the start size up a little bit, just so it's right there. Then turn the opacity down so it's not as jarring. Maybe 64 will do it. Okay. Go back to this. Stop, simulate. Just adjust the playback time right here. We can see what color we might want just by watching this. So I think that's a little bit better. So we'll go with that one. And actually, maybe I do want them rotating as they go along, somewhat. So somewhere between -45 and 45. Okay. So now we go to this particle system, and because we don't want these little balls rendering right here, these little flares, or whatever you might want to call them, we can... Actually, I can maybe make this a lens flare, but not in an animated sprite sheet, but rather something like that. That doesn't look too bad. So let's see, what does that look like? Cool. Maybe change this to alpha, though. So lens flare. Alpha, alpha, alpha. There we go. Okay, so for this one, I'm just going to turn this down to 128. And then I'm also going to enable the gravity, or turn up the gravity modifier just a tiny bit so they actually fall downwards. Sort of like that. Okay, and for this, maybe additive was better. Okay, now obviously these are starting at the beginning, which is not what I want. I do want them starting around the same time as the explosion, so I just changed the start delay for the parent here to 2. What I get is this, which is cool. Now I'm going to again add particles similar to the first ones that we created right here. So I'm just going to copy this because I don't want to duplicate everything inside. Just create a new particle system and just paste the values like so. Now this one's different because I want it to suddenly explode and slow down. And we can achieve that effect by, first of all, let's make the start speed on this pretty high. So let's see what happens. Right, so they explode. You can just barely see them flying off. And then maybe turn this up to 4 and 2. And then I want to turn on limit velocity over lifetime. So I want them to slow down immediately after they explode. Turn this down to 0.4 perhaps. Okay, so we're starting to get the effect that we want. We also want them fading or being visible very early on, so let's set this to 10. Okay, don't want them emitting like that, rather I want a set amount, maybe 25 of these coming out right at the beginning, like that. Let's set this to 1.2. Okay, turn on, well, just increase the value of the noise. You can see what happens there. Turn this down to 15. Yep, that's good. It's looking good. Maybe 50 of these, or 40. Okay. And let's turn these down a little bit as well. A little orange, more orange than the other ones. Okay, and then set them to 2. So let's see what this entire animation looks like so far. So implosion, poof, and those particles show up. Boom. Okay. So let's add some variation between this, maybe 10 to 15. Alright, for now I think that's fine. We're going to go back to these ones, these little trailing particles right here, and what we're going to do is actually add a light to them. So first of all, I'm going to right click this, light, create a point light, just leave these values at default, just turn this on, because actually what this is it's a light template for the particle system. So for this particle system, which I know, which is the sub-emitter and is the trails one, I want these little balls that are coming out, these little lens flares, to actually be lights, because I think that would look really cool. So let's turn on the lights module here, pass it in the light template, turn the ratio to 1, so all of those particles, all 10 of them, will have a light attached. If for performance reasons you want to mess around with this, you can. Simulate, and okay, so right now I can't see this. Let's over-exaggerate it maybe. Multiply that by 10. See what we get. Okay. So I think the range can be turned down, but the intensity wasn't so bad. Maybe just 1, actually. Keep the range to 1. Yep, that looks about right. And finally, I may want to duplicate, which one was the, so it's a good idea to name these as you go along, but I think this is the, let's see, just check. Yeah, this is the big lens flare, I believe. No, this is the multiple lens flares. Is this the big lens flare? No, is this the one? Yep, this is the halo. Okay, so we'll change the halo. Actually, let's just rename them now for good measure. So we'll call these embers, halo. Which one's this? This is the lens flares. Lens flares. This is the smoke puffs particle system. So this one would be the smoke. This one would be the actual explosion. And this is the lens flare balls. If that's the right term, I don't know. And these are last embers or something. Okay, so now we actually know which ones to reference. So we're going to duplicate the halo, and this is just going to be our initial light particle system. So we'll just call it light PS. Okay, and this is not going to be rendering anything, but rather it's just going to be the one light because we have the one halo. And what does that create? So let's turn up the range and this as well. Ratio, I forgot to change that, that's why it wasn't showing up. And you can see the light shows up, and boom. So there you have it. That's mostly all I wanted to show you, and I think that's actually about the effect. That similar to what I showed you at the beginning. So now you know the techniques to layer a bunch of particle systems, to use the lights module. You could probably do something interesting with the trails by just maybe going on these last embers, turning on the trails module. You'll have to give it some sort of trail, so let's just give it the capsule particle texture that I have here. Maybe additive. And you can see what that would make if I just turn this down. So if that could be a cool effect that you might want. Alright, so I think that just about covers everything. This looks pretty good. You can make your own effects. Now you know the techniques to how to layer different particle systems together to create a more complex effect. So, enjoy, get creative as usual, and thanks for watching. Bye.